life isn't always fair. In 2019, I was diagnosed with cancer, and it totally turned my life upside down. And today I want to share with you my testimony of how I overcame it, but more importantly, the journey through it that totally changed my artistic practice. In 2019, I went down to Atlanta with my family because my firstborn was graduating from college. We were so proud of her, and it was just an amazing thing to see. When we got back to New Jersey, we were sitting in my sister-in-law's restaurant, and she was like, "Steve, what's that on your neck?" And I'm like, what? So I went into the bathroom to check it out, and it was like this big lump on the side of my neck, and it was protruding out, and it was hard. It was like very, very stiff, but it didn't hurt. And I'm like, oh, I must have ate something I was allergic to, or maybe a mosquito bit me. Who knows? It was maybe like a couple days later. We were in church. Our good friend, the doctor, Apostle Chris, she was like, what is that on your neck? And I'm like, I don't know. She was like, well, you need to go to the doctor and get that checked out. It doesn't look good, right? But I went to an urgent care, I believe, and I pretty much didn't get any answers as to what this thing on my neck was. And basically they said, oh, you probably got a cold, or maybe it's infection, maybe it's viral, who knows? So they sent me home, drink water and rest. They said something to that nature, right? But it was maybe like a week later and back in church, and it still didn't go away. And Apostle Chris again said, you need to go get that checked out. Find a doctor and get that checked out. So this time we went to the emergency room, and they had me sitting in there for hours. And I knew that because I didn't have insurance, this was going to be a long wait. And it was. And basically the nurse came in, she took a look at it. She took some blood. She didn't even do an x-ray. And she basically said, oh, you probably have a cold. It looks like your lymph nodes are swollen. That could be a sign of a cold or infection. Go home, it'll go away. And I'm like, this can't be, because I had this thing on my neck for about 2 weeks now. Again, I didn't have any answers as to what it was. And it was another week that went by, and Apostle Chris was like, you need to go and see a doctor. That could be something serious. But I've been to the doctor twice. Well, you need to go again. So my wife found a clinic, and I went there, and the doctor lady was really nice, and she's looking at me, and she was like, how long did you have this thing? And I told her the whole story of how I went to doctors here and doctors there. And she was like, you need to go to the emergency room right now and get this checked out. And she was so stern and so serious. And I was like, okay, well, I'll go home and get my bags and stuff. She was like, no. You need to go to the emergency room, like right now. Like when you get in your car, you go straight there. And I'm going to call and check and see if you got there. And I went. So I got there, spoke with my wife, and she met me down there. And they ended up admitting me, and they ran all kinds of tests. They did an x-ray. They drew blood every hour. And it was just like they were poking me here and poking me there. And all these doctors were coming in and looked. And I'm like, look, what is this thing on my neck? And nobody could give me an answer. They just kept saying, well, we're running tests. We have to make sure. And I'm like, man, how come I can't get an answer to what this thing on my neck is? But I got the point that it was serious. So I ended up spending the night in the hospital. And in the morning, before they discharged me, a kind doctor came in to check me out, and was like, he was a ear, throat, and ears, nose, throat specialist. And he took a look at me, and he was like, well, we can't be exactly sure what this is, but we want to run some further tests on you. They ended up doing one of those scope things that they put through my nose and went down into my neck. It was the most horrible thing that I ever encountered. And But he was frank. He was like, look, we can't exactly say what this is, but it is serious. We want to make sure. We want to make sure we know what it is before we tell you what it is. So that gave me some relief, but not a lot. But I just knew that this was serious. After all that testing was done, the doctor came back and said, well, we want to do some further testing. We have to do a biopsy. We want to take a sample of the lump in your neck and we want to do some further testing. And I'm like, sure. So basically, they had to schedule out an operation to do that, which was another 2 weeks out. At this time, I was freaking out because I was like, oh my goodness, I don't have insurance. How much is this going to cost me? This was getting scary. He also ordered that I get a PET scan. I guess that's what it's called, a PET scan. And basically, it's a full body scan. They wanted to make sure they were getting a full picture. But because I didn't have insurance, that was going to cost me. And it did a good 2,000 and something bucks, which thankfully my family raised that money for me to get that money so that can be done. So it was another 2 weeks of waiting. And I did get the operation, the biopsy, had to go under for it. A couple days later, when the results came back, it was negative. And I'm like, whew, finally, that's good, you know? But here was the problem. It was negative, but this thing was still on my neck and it wasn't going away. And that was the area of concern. The doctor, being who he was like, well, we're going to do some further testing. You go home and hopefully it comes back negative again. And they did some other testing. And I got a call a few days later and the doctor said, I need you to come in right away. And I did. I came in right away. When I got to the doctor's office, they ushered me right in. There was a whole big waiting line, but they ushered me right in because I was a priority. And I didn't see Dr. Burritos, who I was in communication with, but it was another doctor on his team. And she looked very somber. She basically gave me the bad news. She was like, I'm sorry, you have cancer. And my PET scan also came back and it showed that I was stage 4 cancer. Stage 4 is like a high level of cancer. I had what they called non-Hodgkin's lymphatic cancer. I'm sorry, I might be saying that wrong, but it's a type of leukemia. And it was bad. It was very bad. And basically they said, well, we're going to have to schedule you to go under chemo. And I was placed under the care of my current oncologist, who is Dr. Kra. I've been seeing him ever since. That's when I got the news that I would have to do a good 6 months of chemo, which would start in September of that year. My first reaction was, Yahweh, why me? Why do I have to go through this? I don't want this fight. And it was really hard. And I had my friend Bishop Purnell, my pastor, pray for me. And he was like, look, you know, we're all in this together. You're not going through this alone. You have to fight. You have to fight for your children. You have to fight for your wife. You have to fight for your family. You have to fight for everything that Yahweh's promised you. This too shall pass. I'm a man of faith, but it's easy to pray for others when they're sick. But when you're sick, whoa, that hits different, right? And never mind the fact that I didn't have any insurance and I didn't have the finances to fund my healing. I didn't know what was next. I didn't know if they were going to skirt me to the side or I was going to be denied certain medications or coverage and I didn't know how much this was going to cost me, which was financially devastating for me. This totally turned my life upside down. And when I started doing chemo, it even got worse. My health started deteriorating. I started losing a lot of weight. I was continually tired. I had stopped painting once I started chemo. I couldn't do any art. I didn't have the energy for it. I was constantly lethargic. It took energy for just me to walk from one room to the other. And mind you, I was still working a part-time job at the time, but it took all the energy I had to do the simplest things, like get up and walk up the stairs. The chemo just wreaked havoc on my body in terms of my diet. I couldn't eat. I was losing weight. I was feeling tired and sick all the time. My body was rejecting certain medications. And I had these bout of hiccups at one point that put me back into the hospital just for the hiccups alone. And the hiccups were started as, something like, a little thump in my chest, but it grew progressively worse. And they became very painful because the hiccups were nonstop. It was almost like somebody was punching me in my chest with every 2 seconds. Boom, boom, boom. And it was very, very painful. Put me in the hospital for a good 3 or 4 days, but they did find a medication to combat that. And it was very difficult. And I did have another artist friend that was battling liver cancer at the time. Well, I found out that he had liver cancer because I had posted something to Facebook at the time concerning my battle. And he called me and it was like, whoa, he was talking about his battle with liver cancer. And we both had similar stories about the chemo and everything that we were going through. Now, I was very fortunate. I had family, I had a congregation, I was constantly under the umbrella of prayer, and I just had all the support I needed to concentrate on my healing. But it was 6 months of no work, no art. I tried to pick up a brush, but I couldn't do it. I tried to create, but I just did not have the unction or the energy to do it. And I was feeling like totally drained all the time. And it was hard. It was hard to put it down. So that was 6 months of chemo, 6 months of doing absolutely nothing concerning my art. And that was hard. That was very humbling. And it was also very stressful because I, I had all these ideas in my head of what I wanted to say concerning my healing process, concerning what I was going through, but I just didn't have the energy to do it. And my friend that I mentioned before, my artist friend Jerry, he was going through the same thing. And he was a very prolific artist, but he didn't make it. And I just remember hearing the news that he had passed, but he fought. And his fight was very similar to my fight, but his was a little more aggressive because his cancer was in the liver. He had to succumb to it. And it was always in the back of my mind. I was like, man, is this thing going to get me? But I also knew that because I was covered with prayer constantly, that I had to fight. I had to go on, and I had to fight for my children and my family. They couldn't, I wasn't going to allow them to lose me at that time in their lives where, they needed a father. And, that was my mindset. I had to fight, and no matter what, I was going to make it. And, when you have a support system, you can do that. But there's so many people that don't have the support system going through an illness or a disease that's as life-threatening as cancer. But for you artists out there, if you're going through a battle, if you're going through a sickness that, like cancer, that has the potential to threaten your life and threaten your livelihood, I want to encourage you to fight. Surround yourself with people who love you. Surround yourself with strength. Surround yourself in prayer. You have to think positive. I was constantly meditating on the word. I was constantly meditating on the scriptures, and I was constantly meditating that I am going to win. I'm going to affirm that I am going to overcome. I'm more than a conqueror in Christ Yahshua. So 6 months of chemo, and March came around. I was coming up on my last round, and I got the good news that, the cancer has been beaten back, and I'm in remission. So I got that good news in March of 2020. And, it's funny because around that same time, Pastor Monique in our ministry, she was working at a school here in Newark, and she was like, well, she was pitching my name for a mural to be done. And I'm just coming off of cancer, being healed of cancer. And I'm like, man, can I do this? So I was highly recommended by her. And I said, yeah, I'm going to do it, because I really didn't have any income for that past 6 months. And, I knew that this was a job that was not only monumental, but it was going to pay well. And I started on that job, and I had to be careful because, I was still weak. My immune system was still weak. And, I would go in maybe like once a week, right? That's all I had the energy to do, because mural work is very hard work. So I would go in, and I started this job, and it took me about a good 3 or 4 months to finish, but it was almost like the end of the school year that I finally completed it. And, in the days that I did go in to work on the mural, I would see the principal walk by, and he would give that nod of like, yeah, this is nice, right? But one day he stopped me towards the end of the project. He was like, do you teach? And I was like, nah. And but I told him I did have a part-time job, teaching kids in a youth house in a drug addiction program, art. So I was familiar with instructing art, but I never taught in a traditional classroom setting. And he was like, well, you should come teach for us. And I'm like, really? He was like, yeah, come teach for us. I would love to have you on. And I'm like, wow. And is this real? I just got hired to become a teacher in a Newark school. And this was part of the blessing of my healing. And it really, really changed the trajectory of my art, because once I started the teaching process in that September, I was healed. I was still, I was still in an area where I had to be careful because my immune system wasn't 100%, but, things were getting back to normal. But now, becoming a teacher, I had to learn a whole new skill. So I wasn't really doing as much art as I wanted to, but this was setting me up for something great. In training to become a teacher, I learned so much about communicating, on organization, and just it totally changed my thinking, because teachers do think a certain way. And what was always taught to me in the beginning was think with the end in mind, plan with the end in mind. And it was a whole new way of thinking, which I took those skills and started applying it to my art. And, this was 2020 when I got my healing. So we're talking about 2020, September, October, November, December, right? COVID started hitting in December. But still, things were going as normal. But when March came around in 2021, they sent us home. And that's when I began, really, really started working more and more on my art. I was, I conceived a plan to do a series, which I now call my hip hop series. And I applied everything that I learned through my teaching skills through that series. And now it's one of my signature series. And it just goes to show you how what Satan means for evil, Yahweh will turn around for good. I want to talk about that because your misfortunes can turn into something good if you allow it. I went through an ordeal with my cancer, and um, the journey of that healing took a toll on me. But Yahweh turned that around for good. And what you're going through right now, whatever it is, Yahweh has the ability and the power to turn it around for your benefit. I now wear my cancer story as a badge of honor. I I wear it proudly because this fight that I fought was not mine alone. It was so many people involved, family, friends, doctors, gotten prayers and support from people out of state, from people on the other side of the world. And it was such a blessing. And it just goes to show you how Yahweh can take the bad that happens in your life and turn it into something good, something powerful, a testimony that others can look to and get hope from. And I pray that this story that I've told you, I pray that my testimony and my fight inspires you who may be going through something similar. You may have health issues, you may have financial issues, you may have mental issues even. And I just want to let you know that you can overcome it and you will overcome it. With faith, nothing is impossible for Yahweh Elohim. And he has certainly proven that in my life. He's proven that through my gifts. My artwork would not be the artwork it is today without me going through that struggle and that fight. And I am deeply appreciative for it. I hope this video helps somebody. If you like it, please like, comment, and share. And don't forget to subscribe. I love you all. And remember, fight. Stay in the fight. Don't give up. Don't give in. You will overcome. I love you. Yahweh bless. Peace out.